last summer, she went on a paddleboard for the first time. And it was really interesting because she would stand up and it was like you could just see her shoulder, like you could just see all of the like anxiety and stress just of existing in her body and not having her nervous system aligned. All of it melted away. And it was like because she had to focus and engage everything in her body to balance and stand up. But it was like such a great visual representation of what that looks like for her. And it just, I think about it all the time because it's like she needs that. She needs to feel like everything is aligned in her sensory system, that she feels safe, that she feels connected, because otherwise everything else is noise. And that coming in for her, then it halts that connection. And it's just been so neat to be able to piece those things together and see it and see how she needs that type of input. And especially because it's really opposite from the rest of our family's need. And so we're not used to seeing it, and recognizing it just you feel like you found the gold in the treasure box because you figured out how her body is processing the world around her.
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go.
Hello, everyone. Victoria here from the Sensory Savvy Mama podcast. I'm so excited for this episode today. Today, our guest is Jess Caraway, who is a mom of two, an autism advocate. She's all about inclusion. Her daughter, Aliza, who has a diagnosis of autism, is a Gestalt language processor. And she talks about it in the episode, how they tried out public school, but ended up shifting to homeschooling. And she also has founded the If You Know One project. And it is just the moms that I meet, you guys are just all amazing, whether you're starting a project or not. But I'm just so amazed at the creativity and the intelligence and the advocacy that comes out of this community. So she started that If You Know One project, and she has a post on her Instagram page pinned to the top that's all about her advocacy for more inclusion. Also, I checked out her Etsy shop, and she has some darling inclusive clothing options if that's something that you want to do and are loving your walking billboard era. And just because we know one person with autism doesn't mean we know everybody with autism. And just because your person with autism or your autistic child needs this doesn't mean every other autistic child needs or wants that the same. And I know it's hard to live in a space that is not inclusive as your child is growing up and watching that. But in the 10 years that I have been doing this work as an OT, I have been amazed at how things are slowly shifting. And yes, sometimes it feels like a 1-degree shift and not enough. But there are shifts happening. Today, I just hope you enjoy this story so much. I really enjoyed the conversation with Jess, and we had so much fun talking that it's going to be a 2-part episode. So the first one will air this week, and then next week will be part 2. But definitely go check her out on Instagram if you haven't. Details on where you can find her will be in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. So I'm so excited for this episode. I can't wait for you to hear it, both parts 1 and 2. Let's get started. Tell us a little bit about you and your story and kind of your family's journey.
Okay, so I am Jess Caraway. My family and I live in Idaho, and my daughter is 10 years old. She is autistic, and my son is 12 years old. And we are just a small, tiny unit of a family, and we do a lot of outdoor activities. We love to be outside. And so much of that has played into how we support our daughter, Aliza. And yeah, we started to hindsight's 2020. So we recognized some signs in Aliza's and traits. At the time, though, we did not have any background knowledge on autism, sensory seeking, sensory processing, any of that. My son, my oldest, he's not diagnosed. In comparison, he's neurotypical compared to my daughter, but there are certain signs now, sort of discovery. There are things with my son now that I'm like, this is something that makes sense. There's quite a journey from noticing some developmental delays to getting a diagnosis. Looking back, I can see all those really early signs of stimming and really needing like deep sensory input, the way that she was playing, the speech delays. We also had her diagnosis. Well, her pediatrician appointment was in the COVID time. So just a really long path to getting understanding and really feeling confident in the journey of having an autistic child. But now we've had this learning curve under our belt for several years now. And you take in so much information and you get to hear so many perspectives, and it's really built a foundation for us that we feel so confident in supporting her now, but it wasn't always that way. And that's what's fun to share about our journey is there is such a learning process. You have to allow yourself the time for that, just getting to the point of understanding, and then now being able to say, oh, if we had known that, we would have figured this out a while ago. But anyway.
That is a really hard part about the journey. And it's something, though, that I think, so there's two things I want to say to that is one, the internet is a wonderful thing, but it also can cause so much, like almost research paralysis, because there's so much information out there and there's so many contradicting and conflicting pieces of information out there that it's really hard to wade through all the muck to figure out what really works for you and for your kid. Because every child with autism is different. Every neurodivergent child is different and has different needs. And that's hard as a family. And every family's like unique culture and lifestyle is different. What works for your family doesn't work for another family, and that's okay. And so I think that is something that I see with parents really early on is trying to figure out, like, how do I do this thing? Some of that is you got to figure it out for you and your family,
Right.
what those sensory needs are. And it's hard to navigate through that. But the sensory piece, I'm biased because I'm an OT and I love the sensory system. But when parents get that figured out, that is such a huge light bulb moment of, oh, that's why they do things that way. And then it kind of, other things starts to fall into place a lot easier. But yeah, it is a lot of learning because it's not something that we talk about. We learned about seeing and smelling and touching and tasting, but those three invisible ones that we don't know about, I know OTs still that don't know about them.
Wow.
Interoception and vestibular and proprioceptive input are such a big thing and so important for regulation within this population. And so if you don't have that language and you aren't even aware of that, you know what to look for.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so interesting because when Aliza first started occupational therapy and we had a great OT, she really Aliza is somebody who I feel like I'm constantly telling people, just give her a minute, just give her 2 minutes. She will just give her time to connect. But we're so fast. Like we want these fast reactions in life right now. And especially technology, everything's at our fingertips. So it's like we want an instant connection with someone. And if we don't have that, then we write it off, not even meaning to. And so with Aliza, I just feel like I'm constantly like, wait, she's going to glance your way. She's going to give you an acknowledgement. Like she wants to connect with you. She needs some time. And for her OT, they just jived really well from the beginning. And the thing I always tell people with occupational therapy is find someone who you have a good conversational rapport with, and you will learn things so much faster because, like you're saying, like proprioceptive input, vestibular input, interoception. I had no language for those things, but I would go to our occupational therapist and we'd have like our check-in at the beginning. And I would say things to her like, we had covered the basics of Aliza is very much so a sensory seeker. She loves just deep pressure input. Like she just really seeks that out and needs it for her body to feel aligned and whole and where she knows where it's at. And but I would go to the appointments and I would be like, this week I noticed Aliza was doing this. And it's like, I would say things like, it's like I can tell her body is craving these movements. Like she needs this, or she needs this pull, or she's pushing up on things. And it's like she wants to flex these muscles, or she wants to hang off of something and feel this. And what I didn't realize was I was unraveling the definitions of a lot of those. I'm like, she wants to spin really fast, or she wants to. And so it was really great because it was like, I was doing some observation and detective work at home, but then being able to come to a professional and really like hash that out and really see, yeah, that is what she's doing. And I'm like, it changed my perspective on, I always tell parents, I know it's hard because therapy appointments are a lot of times the only break that you get in terms of letting them go in. But if you are able to go into sessions with your child, the amount of knowledge you will take away from observing someone else working with your child is just priceless because you don't realize it. It took me a couple weeks of OT to really understand what was happening, but it was because you can't view it from the outside when you're the one always co-regulating with your child, when you're the one trying to support them. And so watching someone else do it, it was like I was able to process what was going on instead of it just happening to my body as well, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, no, it does. 100%. Yeah. Because you're just reacting to what's happening because you have that language. And so I feel like sometimes as OTs, moms intuitively know what's going on. You just don't have the language for it. So I feel like a lot of times we're just translating what you're seeing into actual words. And thing is vestibular input, and her brain needs that to organize, and the proprioceptive and activating those muscles and contracting those joints, those are like her body needing to feel grounded and know where she is to know how she can interact with the world around her. Because if you think about, like, I was explaining this to another mom who she's never been able to sit still. And I said, if you stop sitting still, what does it feel like? And she said, I feel like I'm lost in space. And I was like, so you're not moving to fidget, you're moving to know where you are in relation to the chair that you're sitting in. Because if you stop that movement, then you can't feel it. And she was like, oh my God. She was like, how many classes of meditation that I've skipped out, or yoga that I've tried to learn how to sit still. But I actually need that movement for a reason, my body to get that input. And I think that it's so helpful when we start to like piece these little puzzle pieces together of who our kids are and create their neurosignature and this picture of how their nervous system is working. It becomes so much easier to start to implement these little things throughout the course of our day. And then it just becomes second nature. And it takes then the load on you for constantly co-regulating and coming up with things. Like, you get to move from that reactionary position to more of a responsive and more of that connection like we want as moms with our kids.
Yeah, it feels like you're not on defense trying to always like correct. Wait, why was she dysregulated? What did I do wrong? And you can finally sit in like that. I'm on offense and I feel comfortable and connected, and I know how to help support her from a standpoint of beforehand instead of teamwork, which is just such a big shift compared to, especially with an autism diagnosis, you're thrown into this and then it just feels like you're playing catch up. You're constantly trying to learn and keep up. And it's once you can hone in, like saying on their sensory signature, that piece of it, it's wild to me how much that part of it is connected to everything else. Yeah. Because a lot of times it's like we focus on even things like school when they try to focus on like life skills, or they're trying to focus on rule following, or they're trying to focus on sitting in a seat. And all of this stuff is connected to their sensory system. They can't process that until their sensory system is aligned. That's how I always visualize that for Aliza. Is last summer she went on a paddleboard for the first time. And it was really interesting because she would stand up and it was like you could just see her shoulder, like you could just see all of the like anxiety and stress just of existing in her body and not having her nervous system aligned. All of it melted away. And it was like because she had to focus and engage everything in her body to balance and stand up. But it was like such a great visual representation of what that looks like for her. And it just, I think about it all the time because it's like, she needs that. What you're saying with your friend that needed to move around all the time and because they needed to feel their body. Yeah, she needs to feel like everything is aligned in her sensory system, so that she feels safe, that she feels connected, because otherwise everything else is noise. And that coming in for her, then it halts that connection. And it's just been so neat to be able to piece those things together and see it and see how she needs that type of input. And especially because it's really opposite from the rest of our family's need. And so we're not used to seeing it, and recognizing it just you feel like you found the gold in the treasure box because you figured out how her body is processing the world around her.
Before we go any further, I just want to pause real quick and offer you, as a parent listening to this, one small, powerful shift. And I think before we hear the rest of the podcast episode, this will be really helpful. Not a specific strategy to remember or tool to master, just an observation. So this is a micro shift that I would like for you to take. Take it or leave it. But this is the micro shift that you can try. For the next 24 hours, what if every behavior that you saw, or meltdown, or quirkiness, or the jumping off of the couch, what if you viewed it as a message? Not to try to fix it. What if you just got curious of what are they trying to tell me? No pressure on you to get it right. I'm not expecting you to become an OT overnight or sensory processing expert. I just want you to begin to notice. Notice what's too much. Notice what's not enough. Notice where they start to pull away from, or what are they gravitating toward? How are they moving through the world around them? And notice how when you start watching with compassion from a place of how do I understand their sensory system, how that creates more space, more calm, and more clarity for you. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I get it, but I still don't know how to figure out what's going on. I don't understand the sensory system. I don't know what I'm looking at. I need that person like Jessie had. I want you to know that I made something for that exact moment. It's called the Clarity Lab. It's not a course. It's not a deep dive. It's not one more overwhelming thing. It's 10-minute reset. And you can do a couple of them over a period of a couple of days, or you can do it all in one afternoon. It's totally up to you. It doesn't require an additional login or downloading an app or any extras. It's in your email, delivered. You can do it at your own pace. You can share it with your spouse or your partner, however you want to go through it on your time. Just you, grab your favorite ice drink and sit down and open up to how, when we have this sensory lens, it starts to make things click in place for our neurodivergent kids. I made this for the moms who are done feeling like they're failing, for the ones who've tried behavior modifications and tried all the shoulds. And you want something that feels more like truth of who you are, or like how Jessie was talking about with her daughter Aliza, something that aligned for her, and seeing her daughter shift into that place of that peacefulness. within her body and not constantly looking for more to meet that need. I'll put a link in the show notes. And if now's not the time, that's okay too. No worries. I know that sometimes we are just at capacity getting through the day, and that's okay. Sending you lots of love, but it'll be there when you're ready. And when you start to reframe those meltdowns or behaviors or elopements or quirks as messages, when we get really observational, when we stop trying to control and start trying to understand, it makes your job a lot easier. You naturally become the translator and it becomes easy. And your child starts to feel seen in a way that rewires things for both of you. So if you're ready, I encourage you to take the micro step, start observing, get curious, and know that when you start to honor what comes down your system, your child's going to respond to that, and you're also going to have more connection with them. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And let's get back to the episode.
But it's just fascinating to see how connected it is to the things that we as parents hold on a pedestal, like expectation of parenting. When we think about parenting, I think a lot of people are like, oh, what is parenting? How I'm doing at parenting is how well someone else thinks I'm doing. They're looking in and saying, oh, look at your well-behaved kids and your disciplined kids and when it's really challenged us to completely flip our perspective and take out the piece of we need to be the parent that has a child that's behaving, and changing that to we need to be the parent that has a child that feels safe and connected and that they can respond to their environment. And it's interesting how that has played out throughout these few years and how her sensory seeking has led us down this path of really, from the outside looking in, I think people just constantly question, like, how will she ever know that's not okay? Or how will she ever know? And it's interesting when, like, it is okay though. Like, it is okay for her to seek that sensory input. That's what she needs. I had a reel on Instagram that I shared about all of Aliza sensory seeking kind of things around the house. And I was basically trying to explain, here's all the things she was doing, jumping off of the furniture. She would hang on the door to get that pole. She was trying to climb in the washing machine to be able to spin. She was trying, all these things that, of course, at first glance, people are like, wow, like you don't have control over your kid. That's such bad behavior. But we took that and broke it all down to the why. And we realized that's what she needs. So then we were able to accommodate that. We were able to put the climbing ladder in her room, and watching her seek that out to get the input she needs is just incredible. And we have a spinning chair, all these things that you realize she wasn't being naughty. She wasn't trying to be bad. She wasn't trying to. And it's funny because 0.5% of the comments on that reel were like, how do you know this isn't just bad behavior? And like, she's going to get away with everything. But then the rest of the comments, the majority of them were, it was so touching. The majority of them were like adults being like, wow, if my parent had understood this was me as a child. And all I got told was how bad I was, how I couldn't listen, how I was naughty. And it's just like, you realize it's so much deeper. And that's what I try to really hold on to when I feel, maybe judged for the way that I'm doing things, or I question, because instinctively parenting, we just believe in this. We have to be in control, and we have to be the one in power over our kids. There's this weird like hierarchy. And I understand where it comes from, but they're in this, wait, what if we get on their level and connect with them? We're still their parent. We're still raising them. We're still supporting them, but we're also teaching them to be intuitive to their own body, to trust their own body, to have autonomy in what they need. And instead of labeling it as naughty, we can label them as the brilliant people that they are. It is that intuition. Like, she intuitively, I've never seen somebody climb up a door to hang off it to get input. That's amazing. That's amazing that she could figure out that her body needed that and then find a way to do it. And it's just, I wish more people could see that. I wish they could see the full picture. A moment that looks like, oh, great, my kid's gonna be the one that's always into things, or my kid's gonna be the one that's always on it. No, like there's so much there, and there's so much that they could be teaching other kids about their own bodies. And it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, it is. There's so many things in that are just absolute gems. And I'm just so proud of you for how you've shown up. It's one of those things that, like, I have a couple of families that I'm working with and that I've worked with. Just there's a lot of unlearning that you're also doing in this process, like that cultural conditioning that we all have. That's normal because we live in societies, we live with other people, we live with these expectations of what things will look like. And I think one of the things that I learned growing up a military kid, and then I traveled quite extensively abroad, and I lived abroad for a little bit, was like, I had this window into seeing other places and other ways of doing things, but it wasn't wrong in that culture or society. Something that would be here wasn't there because of those cultural differences. And that was so expansive for me to start going, well, like, why is that wrong here? Why are we putting these expectations? And then especially becoming an OT and working with kids in the classroom was one of the big ones of, we have these expectations of how kids are supposed to show up and be in the classroom. But we haven't taken the time to get to know them as individuals first and what they need and what their interests are. And I think that it's so fun when you see a bottom-up approach of starting with that nervous system versus starting with that behavioral expectation of these are a task that you have to perform, or, oh, how are you learning? How are you moving through the world? How are you experiencing things? Let's start to build on that. Because if you don't have those things in place, if you aren't connected to your body, how do you build skills that require you to use your body?
Thank you so much for listening. That was part 1 of a 2-part series with Jess Caraway of Jess If You Know One on Instagram. I hope you so enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to the second part of the conversation, which will air next week. So don't forget to come back for that one. Please click subscribe. Do that. If you want to take that micro shift that we offered earlier in the session to start observing your child like she was doing with her daughter Aliza, I really encourage you to do that. And if you want more support, the Clarity Lab and trying to figure out, like, why does my child do that? That is also available. And that's only $9 right now in the month of July. So you can check that out. Let me know if you do that and that helps you, or if you have any questions. I'd love to hear it. I love getting mail from listeners and people in my world. Also, I have a weekly newsletter that goes out with sensory tips and strategies, both from the perspective of the mom and also for kids. Be sure to subscribe to that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
That's it for this week's episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you love this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.